Hi everybody, hope you're doing well. Welcome back. This is our 10th session, and in this session, we're gonna have a full reading test practice and review all the skills and strategies we've talked about up to now. Now, let's start our today's session. Okay, now as you see, this is a full reading test, and this is reading passage one. Now, let me turn on my pen and start our today's session. The reading passage one is the easiest passage in around 90% of the cases, and you're gonna need around 12 to 40 minutes in order to answer the questions in the reading passage one. But there are some cases in which the passage one is slightly more challenging than the usual. If that's the case, don't worry and just focus on the test and be sure that IELTS is a standard test, and the passage 2 and the passage 3 are gonna make it up for you. Okay, now before answering reading questions, the first thing you should do is to just look at the title. Okay, our passage is about twins, and the reading passage 1 questions are from question 1 to question 30. Okay, then we're gonna look at the questions. Okay, now as you see, we have questions 1 to 4, and question 1 to 4 are true false not given questions, and our first set of questions. Questions 5 to 9 are matching questions, and we have an MB here, and we should be careful. You may use any letter more than once. We have matching questions. And in the next slide, I see a list of researchers. So I would be careful whenever I come across two names of scientists in the passage, okay? But I'm not going to read all of these sentences, okay? And I have another set of questions, question 10 to 13. Complete the summary using list of words A to F, and I have a summary completion questions as well. Okay, now this is my summary completion questions and epigenetic processes. Now, as you see, we have three sets of questions. We always start answering the questions from the first set, and I'm gonna start answering the questions from question 1 and question 2, and I'm going to read the question 1 and 2 and select my keywords. There may be genetic causes for the differences in how young the skin of identical twin looks. Okay, the skin of identical twins looks. Okay, twins are at greater risk of developing certain illnesses, than non-twins. Okay. Now these are just enough for me, and another thing I'm gonna do is to be careful about names of the scientists. Okay, but I'm gonna read the first sentence of this summary completion paragraph as well. In epigenetic processes, something influences the activity of our genes. Okay, and I'm also careful about epigenetic processes. Now, these are important to look at all sets of questions in the reading passage and be careful about them, and choose the keywords and the things that are important to notice. Okay, now let's start answering this passage and answer these two questions. Okay, I'm going to look for the skin of identical twins and also certain illnesses. Okay, now let me skim the passage and find the relevant part of the text. I have differences. Okay, I found the skin here. Now I'm going to read these sentences carefully. Any differences between them, one twin having younger looking skin, for example, must be due to environmental factors such as less time spent in the sun. Okay, now let's go back to the questions. There may be genetic causes for the differences in how young the skin of identical twins look. No, there is no genetic causes, and it is related to the environment. And this sentence is a contradiction with the passage, and as a result, this statement is false. Now let's go to the second one. Twins are at greater risk of developing certain illnesses than non-twins. Okay, now let's look for illnesses. I'm just skimming the passage in order to find the illnesses. Okay, an ailment, and here's a general English plays decisive role. If your general English is not good enough to recognize the ailment, which is a paraphrase of disease, then you're gonna waste lots of time. And as I said in our first session, IELTS reading is around 80% up to your general English, your knowledge of vocabulary and grammar that plays the most important role in your score in IELTS reading test. Now let's read around this keyword carefully. If identical twins are more similar to each other with respect to an ailment than fraternal twins are, then vulnerability to the disease must be rooted at least in part in heredity. And we have disease here as well as one of our keywords. But as you see, there is no comparison between non-twins and twins. Twins are at greater risk of developing certain illnesses than non-twins, and we have no such comparison. And as a result, this statement is not given statement. Now, let's read second set of questions. This is the name of a scientist advertised in newspapers for twins who had been separated at birth. Okay, separated at birth, and this is easy to find in the passage. We can scan and find full hard in the passage. Epigenetic processes are different from both genetic and environmental processes. We need to be careful about the names of the people because our second sets of questions are matching questions in which we have to search for the names of the people, and also we have to be careful about epigenetic processes because our summary completion is about epigenetic processes. Okay, now let's go back to the passage and look for these two questions. I'm gonna skim the passage. Now let's go to the next slide. Okay, we have a name of a scientist here. The scientist, I found this one, and I'm gonna circle this. First suggested the approach and coined the phrase nature and nurture, but twin studies took a surprising twist in the 1980s with the arrival of studies into identical twins who had been separated at birth. And separated at birth was again one of our keywords, and reunited as adults. Okay, now let me look at my questions. Advertised in newspapers for twins who had been separated at birth. Ball chart. Okay, now let's check it out. Over 2 decades, 137 sets of twins eventually visited Thomas Butchard's lab in what became known as the Minnesota Study of Twins Reared Apart. Numerous tests were carried out on the twins, and they were each asked more than 15,000 questions. And as you see, there is nothing about advertisement in a newspaper. And I'm gonna answer these questions and not given. Okay, now let's go to our second set of questions because we have the names of the scientists. Invented a term used to distinguish two factors affecting human characteristics. Invented two factors. Okay, now let's go back to the passage. As you see, Francis Galton first suggested the approach and coined the phrase nature and nurture. These are two terms, okay? So these Francis Galton now invented a term used to distinguish two factors affecting human characteristics. Francis Galton. The answer is A. I'm gonna study these questions as well. Express the view that the study of epigenetics will increase our knowledge. Study of epigenetics will increase our knowledge. Developed a mathematical method of measuring genetic influences, a mathematical method, and pioneered research into genetics using twins. Pioneered research, okay. Carried out research into twins who had lived apart. Okay, carried out research into twins who had lived apart. We had something about twins who had lived apart. Okay, who had been separated at birth. This could be paraphrased with children who had been lived apart and reunited as adults, or 2 decades. 137 sets of twins eventually visited Thomas Butcherd's lab. So this is related to Thomas Butcherd's. Now let me answer this question as well. Carried out research into twins who had lived apart. Thomas Butcherd. We answered question 9 as well, and as you see, these questions are not in order. Pioneered research in genetics using twins, and again we had something about pioneering in this paragraph. As you see, scientist Francis Galton first suggested approach. It means that pioneered the research and coined the phrase nature and nurture, but twins studies took a surprising twist in the 1980s with the arrival of studies into identical twins, and pioneered research into genetics using twins. We can answer this question as well, and the answer is A. That was a little bit challenging questions because you have to know the meaning of pioneer in have in-depth knowledge for this vocabulary in order to answer this question. Okay, we answered 3 of our matching questions. Now let's continue and look for epigenetics and the names of the other scientists in the passage as well. And remember that our question 4 true false not questions is related again to epigenetic processes. Okay, and as you see in a complete test, we have to go back from specific sets of questions to the other sets of questions, and that's important to have a balance between answering different sets of questions in the IELTS reading test. If you do some practice tests at home, you will get the hang of the reading tests in IELTS reading. Okay, now let's go back to the passage. Butcherd and his colleagues used this mountain of data to identify how far twins were affected by their genetic makeup. The key to their approach was a statistical concept. A statistical concept could be paraphrased with a mathematical approach called heritability. Okay, Butcherd. Now let's go to the matching questions. Developed a mathematical method of measuring genetic influences, and Thomas Butcherd. This is B. And based on experience, question 6 automatically would be C, but I will check it out for you in the passage as well. Okay, now let's go back to the passage and scheme the passage. Lately, however, twin studies have helped lead scientists to a radical new conclusion that nature and nurture are not the only elemental forced work according to a recent field called epigenetics. Okay, we have epigenetics. There is a third factor also in play, one that in some cases serves as a bridge between the environment and our genes, and in other operates on its own to shape who we are. Epigenetic processes, and we have epigenetic processes. We uh, should complete a summary about epigenetic processes and also answer a true-false not given question. Now, let me read true-false not given questions as well. Epigenetic processes are different from both genetic and environmental processes. Okay, now let's go back to the passage. Epigenetic processes are chemical reactions tied to neither nature nor nurture, but representing what researchers have called a third component. These reactions influence how our genetic code is expressed, how each gene is strengthened or weakened, even turned on or off, to build our bones, brains, and all the other parts of our bodies. Okay, are chemical reactions tied to neither nature nor nurture, but representing what researchers have called a third component. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Epigenetic processes are different from both genetic and environmental processes, and this question is true because we have here tied to neither nature nor nurture, but representing what researchers have called a third component. Okay, now let's go to the summary completion. An epigenetic process influence activity of our genes. Something influence activity of our genes. Okay, let's go back to the passage. Are chemical reactions tied to neither nature nor nurture, but representing what researchers have called a third component. These reactions refers to chemical reactions, influence, and we have the word influence. Our genetic code is expressed. Okay, how our genetic code is expressed, and chemical reactions is our answer for question 10. In epigenetic processes, chemicals, and this is the influence the activity of our genes, for example, in creating our internal. The study of genetic processes is uncovering a way. Okay, for example, in creating our internal. Now let's go back to the passage. How each gene is strengthened or weakened, even turned on or off, to build our bones, brains, and all the other parts of our brains. Okay, to build our bones, brains, and all the other parts of our bodies. And this sentence could be paraphrased with the word organ. An answer for question 11 is organ. Okay, now let's continue. The study of epigenetic process is uncovering. Uncovering is our keyword, a way in which our genes could be affected by our, Now let's go back to the passage. I'm going to scheme this paragraph now. Okay. One way the study of epigenetics is revolutionizing our understanding of biology is by revealing a mechanism by which the environment directly impacts on genes. Okay. Uncovering could be paraphrased with revealing, and also our genes can be affected by our mechanism by which the environment directly impacts on our genes. Environment impacts on genes. And as a result, the answer is environment and E. One example is that if a pregnant rat suffers stress, the newborn rat may later show problems in it, and we're gonna look for a pregnant rat for question 30. Okay, stress during pregnancy, it can cause genetic changes in a fetus that lead to behavioral problems as the rodent grows up. Other epigenetic processes appear to occur randomly, while others are normal, such as those that guide embryonic cells as they become heart, brain, or liver cells, for example. Okay, in this example, studies of animals, for example, have shown that when a rat experiences stress during pregnancy, that leads to behavioral problems in behavior, problems in its behavior. Because this was a passage one, we hadn't to paraphrase these options with the words in our passage, and we found exactly the same words with the passage, and the only word that we had to paraphrase was organ. Okay, now we answered our summary completion questions as well, and the only questions left to answer is to check the expressed view that the study of genetics will increase our knowledge. Daniel Reed. Okay, I'm gonna look for Daniel Reed in the passage. Genetist Daniel Reed has worked with many twins over the years and thought deeply about what twins studies have taught us. It's very clear when you look at twins that much of what they share is hardwired. She says many things about them are absolutely the same and unalterable, but it's also clear when you get to know them that other things about them are different. Epigenetics is the origin of a lot of those differences in my view. Reed credits Thomas Butcher's works for today's search in twin studies. He was the trailblazer, he says. We forgot that 50 years ago, things like heart disease were thought to be caused entirely by lifestyle. Okay, now let's scheme has it, and we have Reed here. The latest work in epigenetics promises to take our understanding even further. Okay, promises to take our understanding even further. And this sentence is related, expressed view that the study of genetics increase our knowledge. We have increased our knowledge and take our understanding even further. That this sentence could be paraphrased with question 6. And he answered all of the questions in the passage 1. And on purpose, I choose this test. This is the fourth test on Cambridge 11. It is a bit difficult, but I chose to do this practice test in order to show you the importance of general English in IELTS reading test. Okay, this is the end of the passage 1. Now we're gonna go to the next slide and start answering the questions in reading passage 2. Now we are on reading passage 2 and questions 14 to 26. Again, we have 20 minutes to answer the questions in reading passage 2, but we usually need around 15 to 18 minutes to answer the questions. And passage 2 is a little bit more difficult than passage 2. And the first thing I'm going to do is just to look at the title, an introduction to film sound. Our passage is about film sound. Okay, now let's go to the questions. Okay, question 14 to 18. Our first set of questions. Choose the correct letter A, B, or C, D. Write the correct letter in boxes 14 to 18 on your answer sheet. Our first set of questions is a multiple choice questions, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 multiple choice questions. Question 19 to 23. Do the following statements agree with the information given in the reading passage 2? We have true, false, not given questions, okay? And our third set of questions complete each sentence with the correct ending. And again, we have matching questions and ending questions this time. Okay, the first thing I'm gonna do is to start answering the questions from the first sets of the questions. In the first paragraph, the writer makes a point that, okay, the multiple choice questions start with the first paragraph, but I'm also careful about other sets of questions. I'm gonna read the first true, false, not given question. Audiences are likely to be surprised if a film lacks background music. Okay, background music and audiences. I'm careful about background music, and I'm also gonna read one question from the third set of questions. The audience's response to different parts of film can be controlled. Okay, audience's response to different parts of the film can be controlled. And now I'm gonna start answering the questions. Okay, now let's start and answer the questions and read passage 1. Okay, our passage 1, the writer makes a point that. Now let's go back to the paragraph 1 and read paragraph 1. In this case, we have to read the whole paragraph 1 in order to answer the question. So we might think of film as an essentially visual experience. We really cannot afford to underestimate the importance of film sound. Okay, this is a topic sentence, and our paragraph is about the importance of film sound. A meaningful soundtrack is often as complicated as the image on the screen, and is ultimately just as much the responsibility of the director. Okay, the entire soundtrack consists of 3 essential ingredients: the human voice, sound effects, and the music. These 3 tracks must be mixed and balanced so as to produce the necessary emphasis, which in turn create desired effects. Topics which essentially refer to the 3 previously mentioned tracks are discussed below. They include dialogue, synchronous and asynchronous sound effects, and music. Now I'm going to answer the multiple choice question. Question 14, and I'm going to use the elimination process in order to find the correct answer. The director should plan the soundtrack at an early stage in film. No, there was nothing about playing the early stage in film or director duties. It is absolutely incorrect. It would be wrong to overlook the contribution of sound to the artistry of films. That could be our correct answer because it's about the importance of sound. The music industry can have a beneficial influence on sound in film. Again, we had nothing about music industry, so this option is also incorrect. It is important for those working on the sound in a film to have sole responsibility for it. No, it's about detail, and it's not about the writer's point in this paragraph. And as a result, B is our correct answer. Now let's go to the question 15. One reason that the writer refers to Humphrey Bogart is to exemplify, okay, that name can be scanned and found in the passage. Okay, now let's go to the passage and the second paragraph. Let's start with dialogue. As is the case with stage drama, dialogue serves to tell the story and expresses feelings and motivations of characters as well. Okay, often with film characterization, the audience perceives little or no difference between the character and the actor. Okay, thus, for example, the actor Humphrey is the character Sam Spade. Film personality and live personality seem to merge. Okay, film personality and the live personality seem to merge. Perhaps this is because the very texture of performance voice supplies an element of a character. Now, let's go to the question 15. One reason that the writers refers to Humphrey to exemplify. Now we have our options. The importance of the actor and the character appearing to have similar personalities. It could be a correct answer. I'm suspicious about that. Now let's check our other options. The audience's wish that actors are usually appropriate for their roles. No, there was nothing about audience's wish. So this is incorrect. The value of the actor having had similar feelings to the character. That could be correct. The audience's preference for dialogue to be as authentic as possible, and we had nothing about audience preference for dialogue and as authentic as possible. Okay, this is also incorrect. Now let's think about these two options. The importance of actor and the character appearing to have similar personalities, the value of actor having had similar feelings to the character. We had nothing about the value of the actor, and this option is correct, and A is the most appropriate option for question 15. And as you see, we have these sentences. Often with film characterization and audience, the audience perceives little or no difference between the character and the actor. Okay, thus, for example, the actor Humphrey is the character Sam Speed. Film personality and live personality seem to merge. Okay, film personality and live personality seem to merge. Perhaps this is because the very texture of performance voice supplies an element of character. And as you see, we have nothing about the value of actor in this paragraph. Okay, now let's go to the question 16. In the third paragraph, the writer suggests that in the third paragraph, and this question is related to the third paragraph, and again we have to identify the writer's viewpoint in the third paragraph, and we have to read the whole paragraph. Now let's go to the third paragraph. When voice textures fit the performer's physiognomy, okay, and gestures, a whole and very realistic persona emerges. Okay, the viewer sees not an actor working at his craft, but another human being struggling with life. It is interesting to note that how dialogue is used and the very amount of dialogue used varies widely among films. Okay, for example, in the highly successful science fiction film 2001, little dialogue was evident, and most of it was banal and of little intrinsic interest. In this way, the filmmaker was able to portray what Thomas and Vivian call in an introduction to film the inadequacy of human responses when compared with the magnificent technology created by man and the visual beauties of the universe. Now let's go to the question 16 and look at our options. Audiences are likely to be critical of film dialogue that does not reflect their own experience. To be critical, there was nothing about whether audience would be critical or not, so this is incorrect. Film dialogue, it appears to be dull. Okay, you have something about dull. Dull could be paraphrased with banal. We had here banal and of little intrinsic interest. Okay, that could be our answer. May have a specific purpose. Oh yes, it has some specific purpose. It is our correct answer, but I'm going to check these two options as well. Filmmakers vary considerably in the skill with which they handle dialogue. We have nothing about filmmakers' skills, so this is incorrect. The most successful films are those with dialogue of high quality. We didn't have anything about the most successful films in the paragraph, and this is incorrect, and our answer is B. Okay, now let's go to the next question. What does the writer suggest about bringing up baby? Okay, bringing up baby. This is our third paragraph, and this is our fourth paragraph. The comedy Bringing Up Baby, on the other hand, presents practically non-stop dialogue. Okay, this is non-stop dialogue, delivered at the breakneck speed. This use of dialogue underscores not only the dizzy quality of the character played by the Katharine Hepburn, but also the absurdity of the film itself and thus its humor. The audience is bounced from gag to gag and conversation to conversation. There is no time for audience reflection. The audience is caught up in a whirlwind of activity and simply managing to follow the plot. This film presents pure escapism, largely due to its frantic dialogue. Okay, and just like as the previous questions, we had to read the whole paragraph and then conclude the writer's viewpoint from this paragraph. Now, let's go to our options. The plot suffers from filmmakers' wish to focus on humorous dialogue. We didn't have anything about humorous dialogue, and also there was nothing about whether the plot suffers from filmmakers' wish or not. This is incorrect. The dialogue helps to make it one of the best comedy films ever produced. One of the best comedy films ever produced? No, there was nothing like that. This is incorrect. There is a mismatch between the speed of the dialogue and the speed of actions. No, there was no mismatch. The nature of the dialogue emphasizes key elements of the film, and that's our correct answer. And as you see, in order to find the correct answer, we have to use the elimination process and eliminate our options. The writer refers back to the click of a door to make the point that it's realistic sounds. Okay, we're gonna scan and find the click. Now let's go to our next paragraph and scan and find the click. Okay, this is click. For example, the click of a door being opened may simply serve to convince the audience that the image portrait is real, and the audience may only subconsciously note the expected sound. However, if the click of an opening door is a part of ominous action such as a burglary, the sound mixer may call attention to the click with an increase in volume. This helps to engage the audience in a moment of suspense. Okay, now let's go back to our options. Are often used to give the audience a false impression of events in the film. No, they are not used to give false impressions to the audience, so this is incorrect. May be interpreted in different ways by different members of the audience. No, there is nothing about interpreting them in different ways. This is also incorrect. May be modified in order to manipulate the audience response to the film. It could be our answer. They tend to be more significant in films presenting realistic situations. No, again, we didn't have anything about the films presenting realistic situations, and this is incorrect, and C is our correct answer. We answered all of the multiple choice questions, and they were rather challenging because we had to read a large part of the text in order to answer these questions and also eliminate lots of options in order to find the correct answer. Now let's go to our next set of questions. I'm gonna read these two questions as well. Audiences are likely to be surprised if a film lacks background music. Background music may anticipate development in film. I'm gonna read these two questions as well. Feelings and motivations of characters become clear. I'm a little suspicious about that. We had something about feelings and motivations of characters, as far as I remember. Okay, and now let's go back to the passage and look for motivations and feelings. Okay, in the second paragraph, I underlined these sentences. Let us start with dialogue. As is the case with stage drama, dialogue serves to tell the story and expresses feelings and motivations of characters as well. Okay, dialogue expresses their motivations and feelings. Now, let me go to these questions. The feelings and motivations of characters become clear when the audience listens to the dialogue. Okay, when the audience listens to the dialogue. The answer for this question is A. And because I found question 25 in the second paragraph, these two questions are more likely to be in the first and third paragraph, and I'm gonna check these questions as well. The character seems to be a real person rather than actor, and again we had something about real person. Now let's go back to our first paragraph. Perhaps this is because the very texture of performance voice supplies an element of character. Let's go to the third paragraph. When voice textures fit the performer's physiognomy and gestures, a whole and very realistic persona emerges. Okay, a whole and very realistic persona emerges when the voice textures fit the performer's physiognomy, gestures, and okay. Now let's look at these questions. A character seems to be a real person rather than actor. If the film reflects the audience's own concerns, no. If voice, sound, and music are combined appropriately, when the director is aware of how the audience will respond, when the actor's appearance, voice, and moves are consistent with each other. So I think I'm a little bit suspicious about E and C if voice, sound, and music are combined appropriately when the actor's appearance, voice, and moves. And because now let me go back to this paragraph. I had something about voice textures, physiognomy, gestures. Okay, physiognomy and gestures and voice textures. Okay. If a voice, sound, and music are combined appropriately, no, we had nothing about sound and music, but physiognomy, actor's appearance, voice, and moves could be paraphrased with gestures, and the answer for question 26 is E. Okay. And the audience response to different parts of a film can be controlled. I have to answer these questions as well, and it would probably in the first paragraph because question 25 was in the second paragraph, and we had question 26 in the third paragraph, and this paragraph will be in the first paragraph. Now let's go back and check the first paragraph. The entire soundtrack consists of three essential ingredients: the human voice, sound effects, and music. These three tracks must be mixed and balanced. So as to produce necessary emphasis, which in turn creates desired effects. Okay. Now let's go back to these questions. If the film reflects the audience's own concern, it is nothing about audience's own concern. I'm gonna this time eliminate these options. If voice, sound, and music are combined appropriately, when the director is aware of how the audience will respond. No, it has nothing to do with, and C is our correct answer. Combined appropriately could be paraphrased with mixed and balanced. And this was really a challenging questions, and you have to understand the concept of these three sentences and this paragraph in order to be able to answer these questions. Okay, and as you see, we had to go back and answer our third set of questions, and that's why before starting answering the questions, I have read this question, and then I read the question 25, and I selected some keywords in order to not to lose these questions. But if you continue to answer these questions, you can answer these questions at the end of the test as well. It depends on you. But when you're answering some questions, you will become familiar with different part of the text, and it would be then easy to find relevant part of the text, and at least you have an idea where you should look for your answers. Okay, and let's continue and answer our second set of questions. Audiences are likely to be surprised if a film lacks background music. Background music. All of these true false not given questions are about background music, and I'm gonna search for background music in the paragraph. Okay, now let's go back and search for the background music. Scheme, background sound, and they may also add to the realism of film. For example, a filmmaker might opt to include the background sound of an ambulance siren, while the foreground sound elements portrays an arguing couple. The asynchronous ambulance siren underscores the psychic injury incurred in the argument. At the same time, the noise of the siren adds to the realism of the film by acknowledging the film's city setting. No, it has nothing to do with background music. It was just the background sound, and we're looking for background music. We probably all familiar with background music. Okay, I found background music in films which has become so ubiquitous as to be noticeable in its absence. Okay, has to be noticeable in its absence. Audiences are likely to be surprised if a film lacks background music, and that's true. Now let's go to the next question. Background music may anticipate development in film. Anticipate development in film. Now let's continue. We are aware that it is used to add emotion and rhythm, usually not meant to be noticeable. It often provides a tone or an emotional attitude toward the story and or the characters depicted. In addition, background music often foreshadows could be paraphrased with anticipate. Foreshadows a change in mood. For example, dissonant music may be used in film to indicate an approaching. Indicate an approaching could be paraphrased with development, but not yet visible mess or disaster. And as a result, the question 20, background music may anticipate development of film is again true. We paraphrased anticipate and also development in film in our paragraph. Now let's read second set of true false not even questions. Background music has more effect on some people than others. Background music may help the audience to make certain connections with the film. Okay, now let's go back to the paragraph. Background music may aid viewer understanding by linking senses. For example, a particular music theme associated with an individual character or situation may be repeated at various points in film in order to remind the audience of salient motifs or ideas. Background music may aid viewer understanding by linking senses. Let's go back to the questions. Background music may help. Help could be paraphrased with aid the audience to make certain connections with the film. Certain connections with the film also could be paraphrased by understanding by linking senses. And as a result, this question 22 is correct, but background music has more effect on some people than others do. There is nothing about these questions, and I write it as not given. But if I come across something about its effect on other people, I can change my answer as well. But until now, there was nothing about its effect and comparison between people. Okay, now let's go to question 23. Audiences tend to be aware of how the background music is affecting them. Tend to be aware of how the background music is affecting them. Okay, film sound comprises conventions and innovations. We have come to expect an acceleration of music during car chases and creaky doors in horror films. Yet it is important to note as well that sound is often brilliantly conceived. The effects of sound are often largely subtle. Okay, the effects of sound are often largely subtle and often are noted by only our subconscious minds. We need to foster an awareness of film sound as well as film space so as to truly appreciate an art form that sprang to life during the 20th century, the modern film. Okay, now let's go to the question. Audiences tend to be aware of how the background music is affecting them. No, it would be subconscious and they not tend to be aware. That's a contradiction with our passage and this question is false. Now let's go back to the passage. The effects of sound are often largely subtle and often are noted by only our subconscious mind. Noted by only our subconscious minds. Okay, we answered the multiple choice questions and then we had true false not given questions, but our third set of questions come earlier than our second set of questions in this passage, and that's why before starting answering the questions we read one question from each set of questions in order to be able to recognize that which set of questions gonna start first, and we should look for them and answer them in the reading passage. If you do some practice tests at home, you would be familiar with the nature of reading questions. But again, if your general English is good and if you focus on the test, it wouldn't be difficult if you answer these questions first and then go to these questions. It depends on your ability and your preferences. Just practice at home and make sure that you are completely familiar with the different types of tests and questions. And this was also a difficult one because as you see, we had multiple choice questions in which we had to eliminate lots of options, and after that we had true false not given questions. True false not given questions were not very difficult in this test compared with multiple choice and these matching questions, but all in all it was a challenging test and a challenging passage, and I anticipate that it took around 20 minutes to answer. And as I told you at the start of this session, I chose this passage on purpose in order to show you that the general English plays the most important role in the IELTS reading test. And of course, techniques and strategies are important for answering questions, but their value should not be given a priority to the general English. Okay, we finished passage 2 as well, and now we're gonna move on to the passage 3 and answer the questions. Okay, now we are on reading passage 3. You should spend about 20 minutes on the questions 27 to 40, which are based on reading passage 3 on the following pages. Reading passage 3 is the most difficult one, and you're usually gonna spend around 20 to 25 minutes in order to answer the questions in this passage. But in case when you're reading passage 2 and reading passage 1 is a little bit more challenging than usual, your passage 3 won't be very challenging to make it up for you. Now let's start answering this passage. Okay, and the first thing I'm gonna do is to just look at the title of the passage. This marvelous invention. Okay, it's about invention of something. And then I'm gonna look at our question sets. The first set of questions is about a list of headings, and we're gonna match the headings with corresponding paragraphs. Okay, now let's look at the second sets of questions. Questions 33 to questions 36. Complete the summary using the list of words. We have a summary completion, and our summary completion is about the importance of language. And I'm going to read the first sentence of the summary completion as well. The wheel is one invention that has had a major impact on aspects of life. Okay, wheel had impact on aspects of life. Okay, and let's go our last set of questions. Questions 37 to 40, and you have yes, no, not given questions. Okay, and I'm gonna read the first question as well. Question 37. Human beings might have achieved their present position without language. Okay, human beings might have achieved their present position without language. Okay, now I'm gonna go back to our first set of questions and select our keywords, and then start answering the heading questions. Okay, differences between languages highlight their impressiveness. Okay, differences between languages. Differences is a plural noun and important to note. And also impressiveness can be selected as our narrower for this option. Number 2, the way in which a few sounds are organized to convey a huge range of meaning. A few sounds is again plural. A few sounds are organized to convey a huge range of meaning. Why the sounds used in different languages are not identical. Sounds in different languages are not identical. Apparently, incompatible characteristics of language. Okay, incompatible characteristics of language. Even silence can be meaningful. Silence is our keyword, can be meaningful. Why language is the most important invention of all? Okay, why language is the most important invention of all, or the universal ability to use language. Okay, let's start with paragraph 1. Paragraph A. Of all mankind's manifold creations, language must take pride of place. Okay. We have the topic sentence, and our topic sentence is about invention of language. Other inventions, the wheel, agriculture, sliced bread, may have transformed our material existence, but the advent of language is what made us human. Okay. I'm careful that we had something about wheel in our summary completion questions. Now let's go to summary completion questions. The wheel is one invention that has had a major impact on aspects of life, and we're gonna look for an adjective. Okay, now let's go to the passage. Wheel, agriculture, sliced bread may have transformed our material existence. Okay, transformed our material existence, but the advent of language is what made us human. Now let's go back to our options. Impact on, and we have material. And answer for question 33 is E. Material aspects of life. But because I have answered question 33, I'm gonna continue and read another sentence of this summary completion question as well. But no impact has been as that of language. Okay, language is very yet composed of just a small number of sounds. Okay, now let's go back to paragraph 1. Compared to language, all other inventions pale in significance, since everything we have ever achieved depends on language. Everything we have ever achieved depends on language and originates from it. Without language, we could never have embarked on our ascent to unparalleled power over all other animals and even over nature itself. Okay, so but no impact has been as difficult, mild, fundamental, complex, original, and easy. And fundamental is our answer for question 34 because everything, just look at these sentences. Since everything we have ever achieved depends on a language and originates from it. Okay, and as a result, language is fundamental to all other inventions. Okay, we answered this question as well. Without language, we could never have embarked on our ascent to unparalleled power over all other animals and even ever nature itself. And as far as I remember, we had something in our Yes or Not Given questions about uh, the invention of language. Human beings might have achieved their present position without language. And that's a contradiction with the passage, and answer for this question is no. We answered this question as well. And as you see in just first paragraph, we answered three questions, and then I'm going to choose the most appropriate title for this paragraph. Okay, now let's just look at even silence can be meaningful. Why language is the most important invention of all? And this is clearly our correct answer. Okay, we now let's go to the second paragraph. But language is foremost not just because it came first. In its own right, it is a tool of extraordinary sophistication, yet based on an idea of ingenious simplicity. This marvelous invention of composing out of 25 or 30 sounds that infinite variety of expressions which, whilst having in themselves no likeness to what is in our mind, allow us to disclose to others its whole secret, and to make known to those who cannot penetrate it all that we imagine, and all the various strings of our soul. Okay, there is no clear topic sentence in this paragraph. Now let's uh, go back to our summary completion questions. Language is it composed of just a small number of sounds. As you see, we have here extraordinary sophistication, yet based on an idea of ingenious simplicity. This marvelous invention of composing out of 25 or 30 sounds that infinite variety of expressions. And as a result, we can answer question 35. Language is yet composed of just a small number of sounds and complex. Here's our correct answer for question 35. Composed of just a small number of sounds. Language appears to be to use. However, its sophistication is often overlooked. Okay, and also let's look at the yes, no, not given questions. The Port Royal grammarians did justice to the nature of language. A complex idea can be explained more clearly in a sentence than in a single word. Okay, now let's go back to our second paragraph. This was how in 1660 renowned French grammarians, okay, this is about our yes, no, not given questions, of Port Royal Abbey near Versailles distilled the essence of language, okay, essence of the language, and no one since has celebrated more eloquently the magnitude of its achievement. Even so, there is just one flaw in all these hymns of praise, for the homage to language's unique accomplishment conceals simple yet critical incongruity. Okay, simple yet critical incongruity. Language is mankind's greatest invention, except, of course, that it was never invented. This apparent paradox is at the core of our fascination with the language, and it holds many of its secrets. Okay, now let's go back to yes or not given question. The Port Royal grammarians did justice, okay, to the nature of the language. Here in this paragraph, we had essence, and essence could paraphrase with nature, distilled the essence of language, and no one since has elaborated more eloquently the magnitude of its achievement. You have to understand the concept of these 2-3 sentences in order to be able to answer this question. But the correct answer is yes. And we paraphrase nature with essence as well. Okay, now let's go and choose a title for this paragraph. But I'm a little bit suspicious about this paragraph. If you can't decide which title to choose for a specific paragraph, just skip it. You can skip, and this is a good technique. And I'm going to skip this paragraph in order to show you that if you skip, then you can answer other paragraphs and eliminate your options, and then deciding to choose the appropriate title for this paragraph would be easy for you. Now let's go to paragraph C. Language often seems so skillfully drafted that one can hardly imagine it as anything other than the perfected handiwork of a master craftsman. How else could this instrument make so much of barely 30,000 measly morsels of sound? Okay, in themselves, these configurations of mouths, okay, that's enough. And now let's go to our options. Apparently incompatible characteristics of language. Why the sounds used in different languages are not identical. It has nothing to do with different languages, but the way in which a few sounds are organized to convey a huge range of meaning. And this is our title for paragraph C. Very few could be paraphrased with measly morsels of sound. Measly means very little, few, and that's our answer. Make so much out of barely 3,000, and we have so much here could be paraphrased with a huge range of meaning. Okay, let's move to the next paragraph. The most extraordinary thing about language, however, is that one doesn't have to be a genius to set its wheel in motion. Okay, the language machine allows just about everybody, from pre-modern foragers in the subtropical savanna to postmodern philosophers in the suburban sprawl, to tie these meaningless sounds together into an infinite variety of subtle senses. And that's enough. And let's go to our options and choose a title for this paragraph. Apparently incompatible, no, it has nothing to do with our paragraph. Even silence can be meaningful, and the universal ability to use language. That's corresponding title. Universal ability to use language, because we have here a topic sentence with the same concept and meaning, and we have explanation that it allows just everybody, from pre-modern foragers in the subtropical to postmodern philosophers, can use the language. Okay, now let's go to paragraph E. Often it is only the estrangement of foreign towns. Okay, foreign towns. We had something about foreign languages in our options, with their many exotic and outlandish features that brings home the wonder of language design. Okay, the wonder of languages design. One of the showiest stunts that some languages can pull off is an ability to build up words of breathtaking length and thus express in one word what English takes a whole sentence to say. Okay, in one word what English takes a whole sentence to say. The Turkish word, this is a Turkish word, to take one example, means nothing less than you are one of those whom we can't turn into a town dweller. Okay, in case you are wondering, this monstrosity really is one word, not merely many different words squashed together. Most of its components cannot even stand up on their own. Okay, Now, let's go back to our options. Differences between languages highlight their impressiveness. Differences between languages could be paraphrased with foreign languages. And the next one, why the sounds used in different languages are not identical. No, it's not about sounds, and it's not about silence. And uh, number one is the most appropriate title for this paragraph. Differences between languages highlight their impressiveness. Now let's go to our summary completion questions. Language appeals to be to use, however, its sophistication is often overlooked. We had in paragraph D, it's easy to use and everyone can use the paragraph. Okay, now language appears to be difficult to use. No, it's not difficult. Admired, easy, and original. Easy is the most appropriate answer. We chose easy because one doesn't have to be a genius to set its wheel in motion, and from pre-modern forgers in subtropical sauna to postmodern philosophers in the suburban sprawl, it's easy and universal ability to use. Okay. Now let's go and look at the true false not given questions as well. We answered two of them. A complex idea can be explained more clearly in a sentence than in a single word. We had something about this in a paragraph E. Okay, and thus express in one word what English takes a whole word sentence. And there is a comparison between this Turkish word and English word, but there is nothing about whether a complex idea can be explained more clearly in a sentence or not. And I'm going to answer this question as not given, but I'm careful that if I come across to something about a complex idea and also a single word, I can change my answer. Okay, I answered this question as well, and I have one yes no not given question. I completed my summary completion question, and I have to answer and select the title for this paragraph as well. Okay, and if that sounds like one of Greek, then consider Sumerian. Okay, Sumerian, the language spoken on the banks of the Euphrates some 5,000 years ago by the people who invented writing and thus enabled documentation of history. The people who invented writing and enabled documentation of history. The Sumerian word like Tuma, when we had made it suitable for her, might seem rather trim compared to the Turkish classes above. What is so impressive about it, however, is not its laziness, but rather the reverse, the thrifty compactness of its construction. The word is made up of different slots, each corresponding to a particular portion of meaning. Okay, this sleek design allows single sounds to convey useful information, and in fact, even absence of sound has been enylistic to express something specific. And this hidden question was very similar to detail questions and locating information questions. In order to be able to answer these questions, the key to answer this sentence. In fact, even the absence of sound has been enylistic to express something specific. In my opinion, this paragraph is about Sumerian, but we talked in answering heading questions that sometimes the heading questions could be very challenging, and in this case you should treat them like locating information questions, and indeed they are locating information questions which disguised them in heading questions. Okay, And in fact, even the absence of sound has been enlisted to express something specific. Now, let's go back to our headings. Even silence can be meaningful, and this is our answer. And as you see, apparently incompatible characteristics of language has nothing to do with that paragraph, and even why sounds used in different languages are not identical. It's not about that. Even silence can be meaningful. Okay. Even silence can be meaningful. Now let's go back to paragraph B, and we eliminated lots of options, and we have to decide between why the sounds used in different languages are not identical and apparently incompatible characteristics of language. We have to decide between these two options for paragraph B. In the first sentences of paragraph B, we had something like that. But language is foremost not just because it came first. In its own right, it is a tool of extraordinary sophistication, yet based on an idea of ingenuous simplicity. Okay, a tool of extraordinary sophistication, yet based on an idea of ingenuous simplicity. And in the last sentence, we had something about, except, of course, that it was never invented. This apparent paradox is at the core of our fascination with the language, and it holds many of its secrets. Okay, now, because I read this paragraph, I know what this paragraph is about, and I have an idea about this paragraph, and I'm going to answer this question. Okay, I'm going to use elimination process. Why the sounds used in different languages are not identical. This paragraph is definitely not about sounds in different languages, and as a result, our correct answer is apparently incompatible characteristics of language. And incompatible could be paraphrased with paradox. And as a result, the answer is question as well. Now let's go back to yes, no, not given question. The Sumerians were responsible for starting the recording of events. Okay, we had in our last paragraph about Sumerian, the language spoken on the banks of the some 5,000 years ago by the people who invented writing and thus enabled the documentation of history. Okay, and as a result, the answer for this question is yes. As you see, we answered all of our yes, no, not given questions, and also we completed our summary. Our summary completion was not very difficult to answer, and some of our headings were easy and some were challenging. And as you see, we have questions of different levels. In a specific passage, questions could be easy, normal, and some could be a little bit more time consuming and challenging. But focus on the test, and when you're doing a complete test, you should always start with the first sets of questions, but be careful about the second sets of questions because you have to answer them while you're answering first sets of questions as well. But if you do some tests at home, you will get the hang of what the true nature of reading questions are. This was a complete course, and we talked about all type of questions in IELTS reading. If you think that you have any problem with a specific type of questions, just refer back to that video and watch the video again and practice more. And in this session, I was just want to show you how to do a complete test. I hope it would be useful for you. And this is a sample answer sheet for the IELTS reading test. Please make sure that print some of these answer sheets and have them and use them while practicing at home. It's important to transfer your answers to the answer sheet while practicing at home. Even you can write your mistakes and think about them, why you have made some mistakes, and avoid making them in the future. Okay. Now, this is the end of session 10. I hope it would be useful for you. If you have any questions, you can ask your questions in the comment sections. I will answer your questions. This was again the end of our reading course. I hope it was useful for you. See you in our other courses. Goodbye.